What is up, you guys? It is the end of 2024. I am recording this on December 30th, 2 days before the new year, 1 day before the new year. Either way, we are so close to the end, and since we are at the very end of 2024, I wanted to share with you guys my top books of 2024 and my one bad book of 2024. I know, out of everything that I've read this year, only one book I did not like. Well, technically, there's 2 books that I don't really like, but this one really just takes the cake that the second book didn't even cross my mind till just right now. So we're going to go in order from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 6 or 7 books that I want to rank, and I think I'm also going to do some honorable mentions, just because I think some books do deserve some of the love, but they just weren't my favorite. So we're going to do 6 or 7 of my top books of the year, and then we're going to do honorable mentions. Or should I start with my honorable mentions? We will start with my honorable mentions. This also goes in no particular order. These are just my honorable mentions of the year. Ashford Parker Doesn't Fail. This is definitely top of my honorable mentions. I know I said that there was no order, there's not, but this just happens to be the top one. Everything about this book I thoroughly enjoyed. There's just more that I wish had happened in it, so it is one of my, I don't want to say it was my favorite, but it was up there with what I thought was really well written. I just needed more, and because it's lacking, it's not in the top loved. So honorable mention number 1, Ashford Parker Doesn't Fail. If you came from the last video, then you know that some of my books are holding up my lovely painting back here, so I'm not going to take it out. It's over here though. Her Soul to Take. Her Soul to Take is honorable mention number 2. There was so much hype around the book that I was super excited to read it, and it was really good. But I did have some faults with it, and that's why it's not in my top. Like my top 7. I would have a top 10, but really there's only a few that I really enjoyed. So honorable mention number 2 is Her Soul to Take, which I thought was really good for one of my first dark smut demon romances. I've already read dark smut. All of that is on this lovely guy right here. We're not going over those today. I feel like that is a whole different video, and we're gonna skip all over that. Moving on. Those are my 2 honorable mentions. They didn't quite make the list just because there was a few areas that I wish I got more out of it. And that's the only reason that they're lacking, is I just wish there was more. So now we're going to move on to the list. These are in fact in order of what I thought was not my least favorite, but my least of the favorites to my top favorite. And I've been thinking of the reasons why they became my favorites, and I don't know if it's going to make any sense for the ranking, so I'm going to try to keep it fair. The ranking, I'm going to try to keep it, 1, the way it was written, like the actual storytelling process, pacing, and things like that. 2nd is going to have to be character development. That has to be a thing for me. That is most definitely what makes a book for me. If there's no character development, then it doesn't hit the same. 3rd is going to have to be overall themes. If everything came together, and I don't want to say it happened the way that I wanted it to happen, but if everything came together, I don't know. It's because each of these are different in their own ways, and that's why I like them. Okay, what's gonna form is when we start going through the books, and then we'll know why I like the books that I like. Starting with book number 1, or I guess this would be book number 6. Yeah, we'll start with 6 and then work our way to number 1. So starting at the bottom with book number 6, The Nature of the Witch. This did not happen to make any of my book vlog or my book reviews, because I got this, I want to say sometime near January or February. I've had this book for a while. This book was actually really cute. The reason it's my top favorite is because I enjoyed the way the magic worked in this book. I don't want to spoil any. No spoilers are happening in this video. So this is a young adult fantasy, and our main character is something called an Everwitch. And an Everwitch is something that is rare. They have every element of magic. So these witches all work together to keep the climate together, to keep the seasons going, but something's going awry, and everybody can sense it and feel it. And the premises is nobody can really use their magic outside of their season. They can, but it's weakened. So say that you are a winter witch. You can help produce snow, winds, ice, but you can't really use that in the summer. Our main character is an Everwitch, and Ever Witches were always trained. They were trained and specialized to use every season, and they can use their elements outside of their season. That's why they're so important. So she has to train to use her other elements outside of their initial seasons to help save the climate, to help save the planet. But this also takes a toll on our main character, and towards the whole book, she's debating if she wants to even keep her powers or not. And there is a way for witches to get rid and sacrifice their powers, but they lose their connection to nature, and it's this big painful thing. So the whole time our main character is deciding, is everything worth it? Is it worth the ache that she's going through with the powers that she has, or does she want to plot to get rid of her powers? I thought it was really, really good. I enjoyed it. Book number 5 is one of the books that I did for the reading vlog, Icebreakers. I really enjoyed Icebreakers. I'm not going to say it was like my top book, but the story was actually really cute and really sweet. There were a few things that I had issues with towards the end of the book, only because I wanted a more detailed ending, but I enjoyed the plot. I thought the plot was really nice for a real world storytelling. Second, I love the character development so much between the two main characters and the side characters. I don't want to call them side characters because they were very prominent in the story. So everybody in this book had really good overall development, and one of the shyest characters, actually, I don't want to say they came out of their shell, but they definitely opened up more to the people closest to them, and that was just so heartwarming to see, that everybody in the story just came together to help uplift everybody else. So character development was really nice. The plot was really nice. The structure, I wish there was more that happened with some of the consequences in this story. Don't get me wrong, there were high stakes in this story. And I love the twist ending. I was not expecting things to happen the way that they did, and that's why it's in my favorites, because stories like these can be like so predictable. I was not predicting the ending that happened here. So it was the unpredictability that got this in the top 6 for me. This one I might end up making, this would be book number 4. And I actually could totally make this its own book review, and I haven't decided yet, because I am a romance reader through and through. This book totally surprised me in many ways. One, it was not a romance. I thought there was going to be some sort of romance. There was not, and honestly, it made it 10 times better, because our main character is a badass, and I love her, and I love the relationship that she forms with the second main character. And then we learn so much back lore that our character didn't even know about, that the second main character knew about but didn't want to say anything, and this book was full of really good surprises. Now, I will say that some of it is not written how I like my pacing, but I'm being nitpicky here. Vespertine. And the premise of this book is Artemisia, she is our main character. She is a practicing nun, and they expel evil spirits from the world and dead bodies, and they help them travel on to the next life before they can become an evil spirit. Well, what we end up finding out is our main character, of course, has a tragic backstory as to why she is the way she is, because some of the other nuns her age, she's like 16, 17, they don't really like her. They don't like being around her. She's the weird one, and she likes being around dead people more. That's like the first 3 pages, as she explains that she does better around dead people than alive people. And honestly, I get it. I so get it. There is an attack on her home, and a spirit is released and takes over her body. And so the rest of the story is, I don't want to say it's a symbiotic relationship, but it becomes a symbiotic relationship. So you have a spirit and a nun that have to work together, with a spirit that is said to be one of the scariest, deadliest spirits in the charting system. There's a charting system from lowest ranked spirit to highest ranked spirit. This is one of the highest, and now it's inhabited her body. And you go through this entire story learning that not everything in her world and her government is what it seems. And you take such a deep dive into this new fantasy world, and I thought it was really good for a YA fantasy. Do I wish that it was structured a little bit better? Yes. But was it definitely worth the read? Also, yes. And I was thoroughly surprised that there was no romance, because I saw several moments that it could have happened, and then it didn't, and I was like, okay. So if you want a YA fantasy with no romance, powerful main character, a powerful woman main character, amazing character development, Vespertine is the book for you. I really enjoyed this book. I guess what made it in the top favorites for me, one, the surprise no romance. That definitely set it over the top. the design in the fantasy world, the design between the individual characters is what also did it for me. You just have to read it, Vespertine. All right, moving on. Next on the list would be book number 3. I do not have the book with me because I gave it back to my friend. Delilah Green Doesn't Care. It is a Woman Love Woman book by Ashley Herring Blake, and this book, it was such a rom-com. I have actually never read a rom-com before, and that is what I would classify it as. My friend, she told me that she thought of it as a rom-com, and I was like, okay, but then I read it and I was like, yes. And I think the title I did for the book review was Better Than a Hallmark Movie, and it was 10 times better than any Hallmark movie. One, again, amazing character development between our main character and even our side main character. I don't want to call her a side main character, but Delilah was my main character. Claire was the second main character, and Delilah's development, I think, was such a vast change from Claire's development. Claire's development was more emotional understanding with her life and the people around her. Delilah's was more interpersonal with her interrelationships with everybody else around her and how she viewed her own life. And that's why I love this story. Not only did I think that the pacing went really well, even though the book is, of course, over a week, it really showed how some relationships, one, need more than a week before events can come to a closure, because in Ashford Parker Doesn't Fail, we're still seeing Delilah and Claire's relationship blossom. They haven't even, I don't want to spoil it, but they're still taking baby steps in their relationship, and it's been a full year, so I really enjoyed that kind of pacing. Second, so that was character development and the story structure. The whole plot to begin with, I thought was really great, and it did not happen how I thought that I did. So there was also that twist that just made it unique that I was not expecting, and it made me love it even more. So Delilah Green Doesn't Care is in my number 3 spot. Taking the number 2 spot. This actually surprised me because when I first started my reading vlog, I specifically said that the Court of Thorns and Roses series was not my favorite, and I didn't know if I was going to end up liking this book or not. Well, joke's on me, because I actually did end up enjoying A Court of Mist and Fury way more than I did A Court of Thorns and Roses. One, our character development from our main lead character. Feyre's character development, I'm so proud of her. She started setting boundaries. She finally realized things about herself, and she really stepped into her own in this book, especially towards the last half. I want to say like the last quarter. The last quarter of the book, Feyre really stepped into herself, really started becoming who I think she's going to be in the rest of the series when I finally get to it. Character development from a few of our other characters, actually, that I really enjoyed. But we're still learning about some of the other characters, and our main character she's around them enough, but not enough on an emotional level to really deep dive into who they are. So we're still learning the personalities of the other characters that are grouped into this book. But the story structure and how this is actually written, I actually really enjoyed it. In my book review for Court of Thorns and Roses, this is actually my first fae fantasy. I've never read fae fantasy before. I normally stick to fallen angel, demons, vampires. That's kind of more my thing. So for my first fae fantasy book, I think this is actually pretty good. I don't know if I'm completely on the hype yet, but I have also heard that there are a few theories of the other Sarah J. Maas books intermingling with the Court series. So that also, I'm not gonna lie, has me very interested to read more Sarah J. Maas so I can see what the hype is, so I can see what they're talking about of this intermingled universe. So I love Prythian. I love that there was more than one bad guy, because in the first book there was one specific villain, but then we learn at the end that they were just a bottom tier to the actual main villain who we meet at the end of this book. So it's going to set off the rest of the books for what is to come, and I'm actually very excited. So plot in this book I thought was really good. The plot, I don't want to give too much away, but if you've made it to this book, or if you haven't looked at the Court series, the first book follows our main lead who is taken to the Fae realm after she kills a Fae. It is a debt for a life that has to be paid. And then we learn throughout the book things aren't always what they seem, and that there is this prophecy that is to be had, and will our character follow through on that prophecy or not? Well, the second book blows the first book out of the water. We learn so much about these these characters that are portrayed as villains, and I'm not going to say that they're not villains, because to the rest of the Fae realm, they kind of are, but you get to see behind the curtain of everything, and I think that was a really interesting touch. I love the way that this progressed. I love that there was a lot of morally gray choices that had to be made for the greater good. A Court of Mist and Fury, I really enjoyed this book, which was totally surprising for me, and so that's why it is in the top 2 spots. Now, for the main event. This book, I have so much that I loved about this book. That is why it is in the number 1 spot. There were so many twists. This character is the most badass character that I have read up to date. Just because, if you notice on my bookshelf, I'll bring you with me, there is a lot of YA fantasy, okay? Stuff that I have reread since high school. So this series just so happens to be my first fantasy that is actual adult dark romance that is not YA romance. And surprisingly, the first book was in the honorable mentions. It is the second book that has made the number 1 spot in my top favorites of 2024. Her Soul for Revenge by Harley LaRue. LaRue. There are so many reasons as to why this book is actually in my top favorites. But again, the plot, the overall theme of this book was so amazing. The character development is incredible between our 2 main characters. Juniper, she is one of my favorite book badass characters. She hit the ground running in chapter 1 and did not stop till the last chapter. And then our girl got therapy. Amazing character development. Our second main character is Zane. We get his entire backstory and how he views human life, and then towards the end, how much it has changed. Again, amazing character development. And yes, the smut is a beautiful side extra in this, okay? The smut is beautiful in this book, and it intertwines with the main character development, which again is incredible and unexpected because, you know, some authors write smut just to be smut, but this actually flows with the story and makes sense for each character. So the plot, I loved the plot of this book. And this is a standalone series, so you do not have to read every book to know what happens. 100% read all the books. Start from book 1, Her Soul to Take. Next is Her Soul for Revenge. And then the last book is Soul of a Witch. I haven't read that one yet, so that could bump this out of place at some point in time. But for currently, this is my top book of 2024. And the reason that I say that you should totally read all of them instead of just each individual, like as an individual, or if you don't think you want to read the other ones. Even our side characters, we get more information and backstory on our side characters and how they were as people. And I don't want to say that it makes you feel something for the villains of the story, but it paints you a broader picture of how they grew up and what their beliefs were and how everything happened the way that it did. So the reason that this book took top spot, not just the character development, the plot. The plot was so well structured. I don't want to say everything got wrapped up into a beautiful bow, but most, if not all of my questions were answered, minus a few questions. But I want to save that for a review. The pacing. This happens over maybe the first quarter of the book. We have a few time skips, but that's to get the back plot on what takes place before the first book even happens. The rest of the book, I think it goes over 2 months. I can't remember. It's been a hot minute since I've read this. But even with this, the pacing of this story, with it being such a fast, action-packed book, and I love action. I think that's why this took the top spot. The action-packed of this book is so structured that even though it is fast-paced, nothing felt rushed. Everything felt that it happened the way that it needed to happen. There was no rushing, there was no skipping over stuff and just, we'll somehow come back to that later and then never really get back to it. No, most of it came back at a point where you would expect it to come back, and not in a bad way like, I predicted this, because I didn't. I don't think I could have predicted what was going to happen in here, especially when they team up and work together. Their teamwork is incredible, and off the field incredible. So, Her Soul for Revenge, my number 1 spot. I don't think I ranked any of the other books. I think I wouldn't give any of these a 10 out of 10. I think overall as a group, I would give every book probably here an 8.5 out of 10. Number 1 spot, Her Soul for Revenge. Now, it is time to do the one thing that I don't think I have ever thought or felt to do before. The number one worst book that I read this year, and I don't think I've ever read a book that has made me this upset that I would even put it in a category of dislike, because I have stuck with books that I didn't like. I read A Court of Thorns and Roses and I wasn't really into it, and it led me to A Court of Mist and Fury. So I'm really bad about not wanting to DNF a book, because what if I end up liking it? This book is so unique in its own right, and I don't hate it, I just don't like it. My friend recommended it to me, saying that this is the worst book that she's ever read, because she also could not stand the writing style. I did not like the writing style, but it was not horrible. I've read worse. But the plot of this book, the plot had so much potential. I think that's why it has me this upset. This book had so much potential to be so much better than what it is. Just my type. The premise of this book is you have a 2,000-year-old vampire who falls in love with a human girl. It's a very smutty woman love woman, vampire woman love woman. And so the potential, I know the potential that this book had. It fumbled so bad. I mean, just look at this cover. It could have been so good. The smut that was in the book was very good. Do I think that it could have been written better? Yes. But for a little book, like, I thought it was okay. That's not what upset me. What upset me was how the book was written. You have a 2,000-year-old vampire, and she knows nothing of the human world. She has no idea how people react or talk or facial expressions. She has no idea how to even to pretend to eat food. She doesn't know how to use utensils. She doesn't know how to take care of animals, to the point where this was really cute, and I did laugh at this point of the story, but our main character, who's the vampire, she panics to impress this girl and adopts a stray dog. Well, she lets this dog bite on her like a chew toy because it doesn't hurt her. She's a vampire. But she's teaching this dog how to just sit there and gnaw on people like a chew toy, like a bone. And I'm like, okay. I could kind of see that. And there's this moment that I laughed because, again, she has no idea how to do anything of the human world. So she calls her friend, who knows somebody who renovates and sells houses. A vampire friend, mind you. And she gives her these tips, and she goes to open houses to go look at how humans decorate. She comes back and she just puts a bowl of giant lemons in a bowl. I thought that was the funniest thing. That was the funniest part of the whole book. Between her and Panic adopting a dog. Those were my two favorite moments out of the entire story. If you want a good laugh, I definitely think that this is for you. But this takes the cake on the worst book that I've ever read. Not just in 2024, but honestly ever. If you want to give this book a spin and take a gander at, an interesting plot line that could have been better, this. Oh, that was the other thing there's two main characters to this story, and our one main character, who's the vampire, our other is a scientist, and they end up utilizing each other to create this thing at the end. And I'm like, I know that they were trying to bypass all the science, but it bypassed so much that you forgot it was also part of the plot. It did not matter until the end of the story, which I guess is a subplot and it's fine, but the way it was written, there was just so much potential if this book could have been written longer instead of short form. I feel like if this was a longer written book, it would have done so much better than it did as a short form book. So that is my list. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Have you read some of these books? Do you think that they didn't belong in my top favorites? Would you rank them differently? Let me know down in the comments. But wherever you are in the world, if you're watching before the New Year's or after the New Year's, happy 2024 and hello to 2025. Thank you guys again so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, because I enjoyed telling you about why I like books. Thank you guys so much for being here. I love y'all. Stay amazing, and I will see you guys in the next one. Okay, bye.